My best friend was left at the altar, so I stepped forward and said, "I'll marry her." The church fell completely silent when the doors opened and my best friend walked down the aisle alone. There was no groom beside her, no proud smile, no nervous man waiting at the altar. Just her, holding a bouquet with trembling hands, trying desperately not to cry in front of 200 people. Then she reached the altar, looked at the empty space beside her, and whispered, "He's not coming." I don't know what happened inside me at that moment. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was heartbreak. Or maybe it was the realization that I had spent 10 years loving the one woman I was too afraid to admit I loved. I stood up from my seat. Everyone turned toward me. My mother grabbed my arm and whispered, "What are you doing?" I gently pulled away. Then I walked down the aisle. My best friend stared at me through tear-filled eyes. I stopped in front of her, took a deep breath, and said the words that would change both of our lives forever. "Then marry me." She blinked. "What?" I swallowed hard. I said, "Marry me." The entire church seemed to stop breathing. But to understand why I said those words, you have to understand how we got there. Her name was Emily. Back then, neither of us knew what our lives would become. We were just two teenagers who happened to sit beside each other on the first day of senior year. She had forgotten her notebook. I gave her mine. She laughed and said, "So now you have to be my friend." I smiled. "That's how it works?" "Absolutely." And somehow that silly conversation became the beginning of the most important friendship of my life. We grew up together. We went to college together. We celebrated birthdays together. We survived terrible relationships, broken hearts, family problems, job losses, and all the other things life threw at us. Emily was the first person I called when I got my dream job. I was the first person she called when her father passed away. When she was sick, I brought her soup. When I was broke, she quietly slipped money into my wallet and pretended she hadn't. People always assumed we were dating. Whenever someone asked, "Are you two together?" "We're just best friends." And I would smile, because I was terrified to say what I really felt. I loved her. I had loved her for years. But I had convinced myself that telling her would destroy everything. So I stayed quiet. Then she met Daniel. At first, I tried to like him. I really did. He was confident, successful, charming. Emily seemed happy around him. And if she was happy, I told myself I should be happy too. But there were things I noticed. Daniel rarely listened when Emily talked. He canceled plans constantly. He made jokes about her dreams. Whenever she disagreed with him, he would tell her she was being dramatic. I tried warning her once. We were sitting in my car after dinner. I looked at her and said, "Emily, are you sure he's the one?" She frowned. "Why wouldn't he be? You don't like him." I sighed. "It's not about liking him." "Then what is it?" I looked at her. Because I wanted to say, "Because he doesn't love you the way I do." But I couldn't. So I simply said, "I just want you to be happy." She smiled sadly. "I am." And I let it go. 6 months later, Daniel proposed. Emily called me screaming. "He proposed?" I forced a smile. "That's amazing. You're the first person I wanted to tell." My heart cracked a little. "I'm happy for you." And I meant it, even though it hurt. Over the next few months, I helped her plan the wedding. I helped choose flowers. I helped her move boxes. I even spent an entire Saturday assembling ridiculous wedding decorations. She laughed at me while I struggled with a wooden arch. "You're going to be the best maid of honor." I laughed. "I'm a man. Best man then." She smiled. "You know what I mean." I did. And every time she smiled at me, I wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life by staying silent. Then came the wedding day. The venue was beautiful. Flowers everywhere. Soft music. Hundreds of guests. Emily looked incredible in her wedding dress. Before the ceremony, she found me outside. She looked nervous. Do I look okay? You look. I stopped. She smiled. What? Beautiful. She looked down. Thank you. Then she hugged me. And for 1 second, I almost told her everything. But then she whispered, I'm finally going to marry the man I love. I smiled. Yeah. And I walked away before she could see the tears in my eyes. The ceremony began. Everyone stood. The music played, and then the church doors opened. Emily walked in. But Daniel wasn't there. At first, everyone assumed he was running late. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The wedding coordinator rushed outside. People started whispering. Emily kept looking toward the doors. Her hands began shaking. 20 minutes passed. Then her phone rang. She answered. Daniel? Silence. Her face changed. What do you mean you're not coming? Everyone heard her voice echo through the church. She listened. Then she whispered, You can't do this. Her eyes filled with tears. What about the wedding? Another pause. Then she said something I'll never forget. You're leaving me because you met someone else? The church went completely silent. Emily lowered the phone. Daniel had left her on their wedding day. He had sent someone to pick up his things from the hotel and disappeared. Emily stood there in her wedding dress, completely broken. She looked at the guests. Then she looked at the empty altar. I'm sorry. She turned around. That was when I stood up. I didn't think. I didn't plan it. I just moved. I walked toward her. She looked at me with confusion. What are you doing? I stopped in front of her. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Emily. She shook her head. Please don't. I know this is crazy. It is. I know I'm probably making the biggest mistake of my life. She stared at me. Then why are you doing it? I looked directly into her eyes. Because I've spent 10 years pretending you're just my best friend. Her lips parted. And you're not. She didn't move. You're the person I want beside me when I wake up. You're the person I want to call when something good happens. You're the person I want to grow old with. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I took her hand. So if you don't want to leave this church alone, I took a breath. Marry me. Someone in the audience gasped. Emily stared at me like she couldn't understand the words. You don't have to say yes, I whispered. I just couldn't watch you believe that nobody chose you. She covered her mouth. Then she started crying. Not the quiet kind. The kind of crying that comes after holding everything inside for too long. She stepped closer. You've loved me all this time? I nodded. Yes. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I was afraid I'd lose you. She laughed through her tears. You idiot. I smiled sadly. Probably. She looked around the church, at all the guests, at the empty altar, then back at me. You really mean it? I've never meant anything more. She squeezed my hand, and then she whispered, Yes. The church erupted. People stood. Some cried, some applauded. My mother was openly sobbing, but Emily and I barely noticed anyone. We were looking at each other. For the first time, there were no secrets between us, no pretending, no just friends. Just two people who had somehow spent 10 years standing beside each other, without realizing we were already home. But there was one problem. We couldn't simply get married that day. Requirements, paperwork, and an entire wedding planned around someone who had disappeared. So instead, we canceled the ceremony. Emily went home with her family, and I thought that was the end of it. The next morning, she knocked on my door. I opened it. She was wearing jeans, a sweatshirt, and no makeup. She held 2 cups of coffee. Can I come in? She asked. I smiled. Always. She walked inside. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she placed the coffee on the table. I've been thinking.